everybody. This is Dr. Achina Stein on the brand new What If It's Not Depression podcast. I am interviewing Dr. Aimie Apigian, who is a physician who I've gotten to know very well in our functional medicine realm of we get to know each other, even though we're across the country. Yep. I am part of multiple forums, and I've gotten to know Aimie because Dr. Aimie, because she is doing a lot of work that I feel is actually missing in the mental health realm. And it's amazing because she got there starting as a surgeon and having this incredible journey, which I hope for her to talk about and let you know how she got there, but also to explain the kinds of programs that she offers. And I've referred a number of patients to her because there are areas of treatment that are missing in the psychotherapy realm and in the trauma world that she just knows so well how to do. And she does offer this online, which I'm sure she'll explain what she does. And I'm really excited to inform you about this. But let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a board certified preventive and addiction medicine physician with a master's in biochemistry and public health. She specializes in trauma, attachment, and addictions. And in having found the power of the survival systems, she now runs a concierge medical practice in neuro-optimization for our highest health, presence, and performance. She has found the freeze response survival systems that cause addictions, trauma, and emotions to be stored in the body are what also cause inflammation, digestive issues, and contributes to all disease and aging. And these pathways may not be causing addiction in a person, but they are compromising one's health, presence, and performance. She is the founder and director of Family Challenge Camps, a weekend intensive for families. Isn't that cool? And is the founder and CEO of Trauma Healing Accelerated, dedicated to providing education and online courses for those wanting to hack their survival systems to be more alive. So her course also includes both her signature program, Shift to Calm Aliveness, an experiential course into one's nervous system through somatic experiencing, and her upcoming courses on tackling brain inflammation for energy, health, and aliveness, and the hacking the genetics and epigenetics of stress, trauma, and disease is about to come up. So I want you to welcome Dr. Aimie and get you started in getting to know her. So Aimie, Dr. Aimie, tell us more about how you started this journey. It's fascinating. I've heard it before, so I just want you to start off with letting us know how you got from point A to point Z.
Yeah, and as you say that, like it still surprises me that this is where I've landed after my journey, because this is not how I started. I started very much in the science. I was actually started medical school as an MD PhD student, ended up only getting a master's in biochemistry rather than the PhD, but that's just how heavy I was into the science. Like I geek out over science. And so any talk about emotions and trauma and therapy, like that was just so far from my world. That was not who I was at all. And it was actually during medical school that I adopted a son from the foster care system here in California.
Wow, you did that while you were in medical school? Oh my gosh.
Yes. Yes. Remember, I was not aware of my own attachment issues at the time. So now I understand why I made that decision. But yes, that was my journey. And so it was during my my master's in biochemistry year that I became a foster parent, actually took on 2 foster children and ended up adopting my son 5-6 months later. And so I kind of say that was really what changed my world, because even though there has been so much learning and growth since then, like that's what initiated all of that. And so now having a child in my home who brought all of his trauma with him, I had to learn that. I had to figure it out. I had to either give him up or figure out how to help him, because
Wow.
maintaining that place was not an option.
Hmm.
He was so deep into his trauma and attachment issues that even as a 5-year-old, he was trying to kill me.
Wow.
And so I was running a child psych unit out of my home, and that's not something that is sustainable. So I was really in a position where I had to either give him back or figure out how to help him. And so I jumped in. I started reading everything I could, trying to understand why his brain would be doing this. And I had, been under the impression that my love for him would be enough, that he just was that way because he had never experienced love. And so by me loving him, that would fix him. And so it really was a big shift in my world perspective to see that he could not feel my love.
Right.
No matter how much I loved him, he could not feel it. And if he can't receive it, if he can't feel it, it's as if it's not there. It's, to him, he still feels very much unloved, unsafe.
Right.
And so I had to figure out, how do I actually help him feel my love?
Great. And
so
could I just jump a little forward and maybe can I assume that maybe the reason why you decided to adopt him is because if you just loved him, he would just love you back and solve your own attachment issues?
That's certainly a possibility. What I've kind of landed on is that with my own insecure attachment coming out of childhood, and I was not abused, I was not neglected. I grew up in a very middle class home with a lot of privileges that most kids don't have. So I was very much unaware of my own insecure attachment issues.
Right.
Or insecure attachment style, if you want to call it that. It is attachment trauma, but again, like that word trauma seems to not relate to a lot of people. And so sometimes I just say, well, then let's just call it your attachment style. And if you have an insecure attachment style, we know so much about your nervous system, because that's ultimately where all of that gets stored. But we'll talk about that later.
And that's a really good point, because I usually call it trauma with a little t. It doesn't have to be major trauma to cause these insecure attachments or attachment issues. And so I'm really glad that you actually pointed that out, because a lot of people always say, but I was never abused, but I had a great childhood, but, and so they're not able to allow themselves to actually even go there and actually explore those possibilities. So I digress, but go on. I hope you can pick up where you left off.
That's a really important digression. So let me just add to that, where it's the little t's that cause the attachment trauma. However, once you experience that degree of attachment disruption, that attachment trauma is a big T, because of the effects, the degree of effects that it has on your nervous system. And because it's during that developmental, those developmental ages where your nervous system is still developing, it determines everything for you. It becomes your blueprint for not only how you see the world, but how you see yourself, your patterns for stress, how much stress you can handle. It becomes your blueprint for your body to even in terms of your mitochondria, your inflammation, like all of your disease processes, it all comes back to this attachment stuff. So
Absolutely.
even though it's small t's that cause it,
Right.
it by itself becomes a big T just because of how much effects it has on your brain, on your body, on your emotional health, mental health, physical health, all of it.
Right, right. And if people want to know more about that, they can look up lots of research about the adverse childhood events, the ACE
For
score,
example.
doing their own ACE score to get information about how that even leads to chronic disease, and health medical issues. But
right.
So let's go back to your story though.
Sure. Yeah. So here I am. I'm with my son Miguel and just lost, trying to figure out how do I help this kid. And so I start looking into the science, right? Because I'm a science person. So I start looking into the science, and I explore everything. I become so open to anything that I see working for people. Up until that point, I had been a pretty closed off person just because of my upbringing, raised in a very conservative Christian environment and culture. And so I had been very closed off, and even came into this experience already knowing, what the right thing to do was, because I, like that was the structure, the framework that my culture growing up had given me, was like, this is the right way to do things. Everything else is not only wrong, but it may be evil, and it may be, like all these other tags that get put onto that. And once I was in this situation, it was just like, all right, like I've got to figure out anything that works. If it works, I'm going to start implementing it, even if I don't understand the science yet, because I feel like I've only got so many years and we're wasting time, and I want him to have as long of a happy childhood as he can. And so I started
Good for you. That takes a lot of courage, by the way. That really does. It takes a lot of courage. Good for you, because it's jumping out of your comfort zone and going into a realm of what are people going to think about me doing this? So I applaud you. I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you. Yes, looking back, there were a lot of people in my life that made them very uncomfortable. So that's when I landed on this whole attachment theory and started learning about it. And the more I dove into that topic, the more I started seeing the biology that was set into place. And I could see this being played out in my son on a daily basis, where it wasn't, it was very small things that would set him off. And it would be me just saying that, no, he couldn't have a cookie right now. And that was enough to have a full out, rage, where I would have to hold him for several hours because he was trying to destroy everything, destroy me, destroy the house. And it was just like, all I said was that right now you couldn't have a cookie. Right?
Right. Yeah.
And the interesting thing was also that when we did have these moments of great connection, because they did happen, afterwards, he would also have his rages and his meltdowns. And it was almost as if he had let me in for a second, and that had scared him. And now he had to push me away again.
Right.
And so this was the dance that we were doing. So I really landed on that attachment and threw myself into understanding, all right, knowing that he did not get that attachment, knowing his history, he did not get consistent attachment at all, or even healthy attachment, any of that. And so how do I, at this point, right now that we're at age 6 and 7 and 8, what do I need to be doing now in order to be rewiring those neural pathways and actually have him develop a secure attachment now, even though we're were, several years past the point at which your original attachment style is already established.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what
Wow.
I did. Yeah. So I just kept doing things, kept going to different people, experts, in order to figure out all the pieces. And finally, when he was at almost 10, all of the pieces came together for him. And it was beautiful. It was amazing because he could finally show up as feeling loved and being able to love, and it didn't scare him anymore.
Wow.
It was
So
beautiful.
great. Wow. Wow. What an accomplishment. That's amazing. Really is amazing. Good for you. That is.
No, I wouldn't say good for me. I mean, he was the one who had to go through this, right?
Oh,
Like he was.
I know, but you did too. And I know
Yes,
it affected you
yes,
tremendously. Yeah.
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. No,
So,
I totally agree. He had to, I mean, he did a lot of work with you, I'm sure.
a lot of work. Yes.
And it's great that you were able to engage him.
Mhm.
Sometimes, people outside of a family can engage, a person who's going through that
Mhm.
because they're more of a blank slate as opposed to a parent, even though the parent
Right.
is caring and loving and wants to provide, but because of so many baggage sometimes
Sure.
that they carry,
Yep.
and you're closer to them, they're not likely to listen to the parent. But the fact that he was able to listen to you and engage with you to do the work is fantastic. That's really great.
Well, yeah, yes and no. So
Mhm.
he was not willing at first, right?
Mhm.
And that is the benefit of being able to be the parent
Mhm.
and have some degree of control over your household, over your home, over the environment,
Right.
because no, it is so scary to them
I
that
know.
it is a life and death matter.
Mhm.
And so they will fight you until they feel that there is more danger in not in fighting you than just surrendering to the process and
Right.
to your affection. So no, it was not that he was just willing and engaging. No,
Oh,
I
for sure.
had to
You had to work on it,
I
of
had to
course.
create the environment for him that it made it the best choice for him to choose to engage. But
Right.
it had to be very intentional. And that's why I started my nonprofit, the Family Challenge Camps, so that I could teach other families how to create the environment, both actual, like in their home, and the environment of the relationship, so that they can facilitate that process for their children
Right.
as well.
Right. And it's extremely important to create that safe environment. Really,
Mhm.
really important. So yeah, again, I applaud you in you being able to do that, because that's a lot of work. That's really hard to do. And
It was.
yeah. So where did you go from there? Tell us.
Yeah. So at that point, I had already started surgery residency. And so when all the pieces came together for him, I was smack dab in the middle of my surgery residency. And all of a sudden, I have this amazing kid who actually wants to spend time with me. And who, now, I mean, what a change. And that change actually happened over the course of 1 week, when that last piece finally came together for him. And it was just he was taking the world in. He was taking me in. And I was in the middle of surgery residency. And for anybody who knows what
Yes.
surgery residency is like, you are a shell of yourself.
Right.
The hours, and even when you're not in the hospital, the amount of time and hours that you're expected to study and prepare.
Right.
You are always
live in the
tired.
hospital in your scrubs
Yes.
24/7, basically.
Yes. And if you're not in the hospital, you're at home in your scrubs, because you're on call every 3 nights,
Right.
every third night. And so you're always tired. And I could not do that and be the mom for him that he now needed because he was ready for that.
Right.
So I had worked with a family who had come to my family challenge camps. They were doing great with their kids. And so we actually made the transition and they adopted him.
Hmm.
And it was shortly after that that I had my own health crash.
Hmm.
And that looked like me having such severe fatigue that I could not even stay awake long enough to return my pages from the
Wow.
hospital. I would get a page, I would get my phone, and sometime between that and actually calling the number back, I would have fallen asleep and I
Wow.
would wake up hours later. Obviously not something that could work for surgery residency.
Nope. Wow.
So,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
my I couldn't exercise. I couldn't even go for a walk. If I tried to go for a walk, I would have to sleep for hours and I would have this like inflammation response. My joints would start to hurt. My digestive system was all messed up. Like my body crashed hard.
Wow.
And I had always been very active. And so this was really hard for me. I took a medical leave, and that's when I started to figure things out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that hit me was when I went in to get all my labs done, they said, well, we can't find much wrong. But one thing that is showing up are that your autoimmune markers are high.
Mm.
And so I went and saw the rheumatologist and they said, yes, they're high. We don't know why, but you haven't had like the butterfly rash. So when you get that, come back and we'll give you the diagnosis of lupus.
Wow. I know.
And
Yes.
yes, I remember asking, well, is there anything I can do to prevent this from going all the way to the butterfly rash and lupus? And their answer was no.
No.
Their answer was no.
When we know
And
fully well, there's lots of things that you can do to
lots of things. I did not know any of that at that time. I had not even ever heard of functional medicine at that time.
Right.
So that's when I got to figure things out for myself. And I went home that day and I had done enough studying to help my son to be very clear on the science, right? Science and research girl here, that those autoimmune symptoms and conditions are directly associated with early childhood stress.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started having to look at my own stuff because I could understand why my son might have health issues, right? Like his childhood had been horrible and he did have a high ACE score.
Right.
But me, like, I don't have a high ACE score.
Right.
Why would I have attachment issues? And so that's really when it forced me to look at my own stuff and start to do the research now on that of why would a person who had a relatively good childhood still walk out of childhood with an insecure attachment style and be at risk for all of the mood and physical conditions that are associated, correlated with early childhood stress.
Right.
And then how do you rewire that as an adult?
Right.
Right. I figured out how to rewire it for kids, but for adults, like, is that even possible? And what do I need to do? And so that's been my work since then of starting with myself. How do I rewire that for myself? How do I get not only my physical health in a good place, but how do I actually rewire that nervous system patterns for feeling insecure, for feeling unworthy, for feeling like relationships and vulnerability and being seen and speaking up is not safe. Right. Because that's what had started to show up in my career and relationships and with my parenting. Like it's all going to come out because that's what our wiring is.
Right.
And we can change that even as an adult. It takes a lot of work, right? Just like with the kids, it looks different. It looks different. But it is possible.
Right. So, my audience knows a lot about vagal nerve activation, things that they can do, and they know about meditation and how that can assist with that. Tell me, why don't you inform us about maybe like the top 3 things that you talk about that maybe can overlap or enhance those areas that my audience already knows about that maybe they may not know about?
Yeah. So I'm going to want to talk about the freeze response.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have 2 survival responses that are completely different from each other. Most people think that they're just one thing. And so there's this big misunderstanding about the freeze response. So most people will say, oh yeah, that fight, flight, or freeze response. And that's not true. There is fight and flight.
Right.
And then there is freeze, and they are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And so you can think of it as 3 different boxes that are all stacked up on each other. A person wants to be in that middle zone. We call that parasympathetic, right? So that's where all of those vagal tone exercises are going to be helpful in keeping a person in that middle window of tolerance where they can experience, the normal ups and downs of their mood and emotions and thoughts throughout the day, but they're not going into survival mode. So that's parasympathetic. Now, any response to a stress, the body always first, and by the body, I mean the nervous system, always first goes to sympathetic, always. That is how the body is wired. Okay. And I love how predictable this is because it really helps us then like reverse engineer the process when things have gone wrong. Right. So it always goes to sympathetic first. And that is your fight or flight. That is a very active response. And so you become very hyper alert, hyper vigilant. You can feel your heart beating fast. You may, have some sweaty hands. You are ready to fight, or you are ready to run. You are ready to do something very active in movement to protect yourself, to survive the situation.
Sure.
Now, what happens is that when the body or the brain or whatever it is in the environment that tells those survival pathways, hey, you know what? We may not survive this, and our best way to survive is actually just to conserve our energy and just to try to get through this. And that's when that switches from fight or flight to freeze. And so fight or flight is actually, that box above parasympathetic because it's very active. The body's using up a lot of energy. And then when it decides that the best way to survive is actually just shutting down, energy conserving, and the thoughts and the feelings that go along with the freeze response are, I don't care anymore. Right? I don't care anymore. Do whatever you want to me. Throw whatever else you want at me. I've had so much that I don't care anymore.
Right. Or it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Exactly. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Right.
This is overwhelm. And so this is like that difference between stress, which is going to be sympathetic.
Right.
And overwhelm, which is shut down and freeze response.
Right.
And this is where it actually goes way down. And so the nervous system drops into the vagus nerve, the dorsal vagal part of that response. And it actually shuts down your biology because it goes into an energy conservation mode.
Okay.
So whatever your thoughts and feelings are is actually what's happening on a cellular level as well. Which, just as a small digression, that's why the autoimmune stuff is so strongly correlated with this, is because people in the freeze response tend to hate being in the freeze response. It's not a comfortable place to be always because they want to care. They want to fight for themselves. They want to be able to speak up for themselves. And so when they feel their body go to this place where, forget it, I don't care. I don't care. What's the point?
Right.
They hate themselves for being there. And autoimmune is the cellular version of hating yourself.
Right.
So there's that connection.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When we look at what's happening in early childhood, an infant, a small child, that really is their only response to surviving a relationship where they don't always feel connected and safe.
Mm.
So what happens is that a child feels the disruption in the relationship. Maybe their parent is distracted. Maybe their parent is busy. Maybe their parent is even just on their phone, right? Like there's so many distractions in the world today that disrupt that emotional, energetic, nonverbal communication that normally exists between a mother, especially, and her child.
Right. And it's
so
about their needs not being met.
Yes, and more of it being emotional needs, right?
Emotional needs not being met.
And when we even talk about emotional needs, what we're really talking about is regulation of the nervous system and regulation of the vagus nerve.
Right.
And so there's this dysregulation that happens where we feel unsettled. We maybe have some activation, and we're trying to calm ourselves down, but a child does not have that ability yet. An infant does not have that ability yet. And so they look to their parent to help them regulate and come back into that calm state.
Right.
And when their parent is even, well, obviously if their parent isn't there at all, right, that would be one thing. But if their parent is there, but not emotionally there, not mentally there, not distracted and busy, that child is not getting that regulation that they need. And so that's what has come out of Dr. Alan Shore's work, is that attachment theory is really regulation theory, because the nervous system is not getting the degree of regulation that it needs to feel secure, to be in parasympathetic. Right. And so the result is that the child actually goes to the freeze response quite a lot in order to survive. And it puts this pattern into their wiring. They have this highway now that's well paved in their brain and their nervous system that says, hey, anytime you experience stress, just go to the freeze response, because that's going to be your best way to survive this. And so they tend to not spend very much time in the stress and the sympathetic state. They, in response to a stress, they very quickly, within usually 30 seconds to a minute, are already in that overwhelm. This is too much for me to handle. My best thing is just to kind of like retract into myself, retreat into myself, avoid conflict, avoid confrontation, and just conserve my energy. And so that's the danger of coming out of having an insecure attachment style, is that this freeze response is so strongly your pattern of responding to any stress in the world that it actually has decreased your threshold for stress and makes you go to that place of overwhelm all the time. And it really wreaks havoc on your health, your physical health. Obviously, your mood and mental health is going to be, struggling and challenged as well. But this has the strongest effects on a person's physical health as well. Right.
And that can look like a variety of symptoms besides autoimmune, but exhaustion, weight gain, fatigue.
Yeah.
Like you said, fibromyalgia, right?
Yes.
Chronic pain.
Yes.
And
all of those
people have a sudden onset of all of these symptoms together.
Yes. And that is because this can be also an epigenetic condition. And so when they all come on at the same time, that's usually because the person has had, this accumulated burden on their health, on their nervous system. Maybe they've been storing different life experiences, negative emotions, memories, and it's accumulated. And then there's one final insult. And for many people, the stress of, 2020 will be that final insult for their for their biology, for their nervous system, for their survival response to just go into that epigenetic response where they're going to have all of these symptoms.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
you can have an accumulation of things, and then
Yes.
there's one thing that causes a
Yeah.
trigger where everything crashes.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
what can you give? I know obviously it's a program that people really need to do, but can you give us an idea of what are some of the things that they can do to sort of reverse engineer this process?
Yes. Yes. Great question. So the place that I want to start everybody is actually just helping them understand which of those 3 states of their nervous system they are in, how to recognize that, so that when they recognize that they've gone into the sympathetic or they've gone into the freeze response, how can they shift themselves out of that and back into that healthy, vagal, parasympathetic place?
Right.
Because most people have no clue where their nervous system is at, in which state it is in. And so they go most of their days, most of their life in either stress mode or shut down and overwhelmed mode without knowing it. Right. And a lot of people just go back and forth between overwhelm and stressed, right? These are the people who need a deadline in order to get anything done because they need that adrenaline to pull them out of the freeze response.
Right.
Right.
And then when it's over, they crash.
They crash again. They go right back into the freeze response. Right.
Right.
And these are the people that, come home from work and they just want to veg out. They just want to zone out. They just want to, numb out sometimes. People can numb out with over-exercising, overworking, overeating.
Right.
These are all coping mechanisms for the freeze response.
Right.
And so recognizing.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And then this is where the addictions. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I just sit after dinner and I have to have my glass of wine to wind down. Right.
To wind down. Right. Yes.
Exactly.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So just being able to understand which state your nervous system is in at any given point is going to be essential for a person being able to master their emotional states, their survival states, and then give them the tools to, all right, so you've recognized which state you're in. You want to bring it back to that healthy, parasympathetic, calm, connected, creative, alive. How do you do that? And so that's what my course, the Shift to Calm Aliveness course does, is that it teaches you what state you're in, how to recognize that, and then how to shift yourself to that parasympathetic state so that you can then be building more and more time in that state, reteaching, rewiring, reverse engineering your survival pathways to be spending more and more time in that parasympathetic state and not in those survival states that most of us, spend a lot of time. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So how long is that course that you're offering? How many weeks?
So I have designed it as a 7-day course.
Oh.
However, there is no way that you're going to become a master of your nervous system in 7 days.
Right.
And I will also say that for some people, just starting this work is going to be overwhelming. That's what happened to me when I first started my trainings in somatic experiencing, and they were just giving lectures, right? Like Peter Levine would just talk about the freeze response. I would go into the freeze response right there in the middle of the training.
Wow.
And my mind would turn off and it would go somewhere else. And then, 15, 30 minutes later, I'm coming back and I'm realizing like, oh, what page is everybody else on? Because I was somewhere else, right? That is the freeze response. And so sometimes just hearing about the topic, it's almost like your body is like, yes, like I recognize that is me. And whoa, that's overwhelming to see myself. And I need to go into the freeze response. So knowing that, I have allowed for that. And people have 3 weeks that they can complete the course so that they can take days off if they need to. And if they don't need to, they can actually go through the course 2 or 3 times during that whole time in order to really master those exercises and the knowledge that I teach there.
Right. That's great. It does come to it really does come down to applying and putting into practice different techniques. It's not enough to just know about it. You really have to change that groove and create new grooves in your, and create neuroplasticity in terms of new habits. And so that's the piece that I think a lot of people don't quite understand, and then people get frustrated with doing things like meditation, because they think that, it should just work the first time. It's like, and they get frustrated. It's you're creating new grooves into your brain. And so it is a matter of again and again and again, and being patient with yourself and understanding that it's a practice. And I talk about it as sculpting yourself, re-sculpting yourself. And so if you were to get a mound of clay, it's going to take time, putting those different, pushing in and pushing out different parts of that clay to create a sculpture. So, and you have to allow for that time. So,
and I would just say, like, that's exactly why I created this course, because it is an experiential course. It is an experience. I start you on day one actually with managing depression and sadness and grief. And I don't talk about it, right? I just say, this is what we're going to do. And let's do this gently, but we're going to do this because it's the experience, and it's creating that different experience for your body, not just reading about something, not just talking about something, but we actually have to have your nervous system experience something different for that wiring to be changed. So you're exactly right. And even with the meditation piece, like the meditation for some people who have such a strong pull towards the freeze response, meditation is too close to that mentally checking out that it's dangerous for them. And it actually will keep that pattern of freeze response very strong in their life, and they shouldn't be doing meditation at this point in their life until they've done this work of getting their nervous system more grounded in that parasympathetic state, so that they're not using meditation as just another way to go into their freeze response without realizing it.
That's an excellent point. And that might also be why some people don't like meditation, right? So there are people who are stuck in fight flight that need to be in fight flight because they want to avoid what comes up in meditation. And so they can't bring themselves down. But you're also talking about people who are in freeze that shouldn't be there, and they need to bring themselves up. So that's a fantastic point. So if somebody is doing meditation, and they are, and what comes up for them that makes it look like, how would they know that that's happening for them if they're doing meditation and it's actually driving them into freeze? Is there anything that comes up for you that you could give as a pointer to, maybe that's me?
So with the freeze response, one of the classic things is that you're not really in your body. You're not really present. So for some people, once they start doing this work and actually focusing on what's happening in their body, they realize that when they are in the freeze response, they tend to not feel their legs as much.
Okay.
And that makes sense, because the vagus nerve is kind of the wiring for the freeze response, and its branches end in your pelvis. It doesn't go down into your legs, whereas the sympathetic, that chain, runs down your spinal cord, and it goes to every single muscle in your entire body. So with the sympathetic, you can be very much, very engaged. Your legs are very engaged. Your whole body's engaged. Whereas the freeze response, people can tend to notice that they can have pain in their stomach. They feel like they need to kind of be slightly bent over to protect their stomach. They may not feel their legs as much, right? They don't really feel their feet and their feet on the ground. They don't feel their weight. They don't feel gravity, like pulling them down into their chair. They're kind of, they're
Floating.
not really
Floating.
Yeah. Yes. Floating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you do to get them out of that state?
Yeah. So there's lots.
That's not a heavy question.
I mean, yes and no, because it's not a simple thing. It's not just like do this, and it just, switches the flip and you're out of the freeze response.
Right.
The freeze response is like, I have such high respect for it because I have worked with it for so long now.
Right.
And so there are some times where you're not going to be able to come out of the freeze response right away.
Mm-hmm.
When I used to pretty much all the time live in either freeze response or stress and sympathetic. And that's another point that I'd like to make, is just that a lot of people who are in that stress and sympathetic and need to keep themselves going, either caffeinated or, whatever it is, like just keep yourself going. It's because they're actually fighting their freeze response.
Right.
And
absolutely.
when they actually stop and sit down, they go into this floaty freeze response that's so uncomfortable. And so that's their motivation to stay in the sympathetic.
Right.
So it's not that they don't have a freeze response. No, actually the opposite. They have such a strong freeze response. It's always right there under the edge, and they're trying constantly to stay right above that, to not go into their freeze response.
Right.
And once you go into the freeze response, it's a timed biological thing. And we know this from the animal kingdom, that when an animal goes into a freeze response, like the opossums, or any animal does that, even, a deer or something, when they're being chased and they don't think that they can outrun, the cheetah, the mountain lion, whatever, and they go into their freeze response,
mm-hmm.
they wake up out of it on their own.
Right.
And there's nothing that you can really do as a person or as an outside person to speed that clock up. And it's the same thing in our body. So what I teach is that it's not so much pulling yourself out of the freeze in the moment. It's how can I give you the tools to not even have yourself go into the freeze response, to even notice when you're approaching that line of being overwhelmed and pull you back. Because once you go into the freeze response, for me, it's still about 2.5, 3 days.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah. Now I still go to work, I still function, but I'm not fully present. I'm just going through the motions.
Right.
Right.
So you're saying that there's not much you can do other than to recognize that you're in it, and that alone, knowing that you're in the freeze response, I think that's helpful to say, okay, I know I'm in the freeze response. I can't feel my legs. I'm a little floaty. And
I just want to zone out. I just want to watch this movie and not think, because it really does come down to energy conservation. So anything that takes up more energy
mm-hmm.
is not going to be what you want to do when you're in the freeze response.
So you kind of have to ride it out and know what your time period is and ride it out. Yes.
And know how to support your body so that it can come out of it, because if you're not supporting your body will stay in it longer. And so you really do need to get to the point where you can, even just supporting your digestive system. Your digestive system is shut down in the freeze response. So, choosing a different diet that is going to be supportive for your digestive system, and not this big load of food that it has to digest and absorb, because it's not going to be able to do that as well when you're in the freeze response.
Right.
And this is not the time to be exercising. This is not the time to, be trying to push yourself to do a project, to think, to create. Right. You're in the freeze response. And if you try to make yourself do that, you're just going to get frustrated and hate yourself. And then comes all of the shame, and the shame will keep you in the freeze response.
Exactly.
So there's
Exactly.
all these things that you can be doing to support your body. Again, it kind of comes back to creating the environment, right? Creating the environment for your body to be able to feel safe in letting down, in shutting down. And so what I even have people do is make sure that they have created the environment, look around, orient, and see, let your body see that it is safe to shut down for a time.
Mm,
Everything is in place, because otherwise you're kind of going to be at that point where you feel the need to shut down, you're shutting down, but there's the stress because things aren't done, or it's not safe to shut down. There may be people in the environment that are emotionally triggering you still, who don't understand the shutdown, and so are trying to, and that just puts you further into that. And so
exactly.
even just creating the space, creating that environment for your body to let itself shut down for a time, then it will be able to come out faster, sooner.
Right.
And then we work on next time not going into the freeze.
Right. And so,
Mhm.
hopefully people can learn more tips about what those things
Yes.
are with
Yes.
you when you do
Yes.
the
Yes.
program. It's
Yeah.
great. I mean, it
Yeah.
sounds like it's a reasonable program to afford, that people can just, go there, do 7 days and just
Yes.
repeat it. That's fantastic that you
Yes.
offer that.
Yes.
I have to say, there are not too many people, I don't know a single other person, to be honest, that does what you do. And I'm so happy that you provide this and educate people about this. There are a lot of psychotherapists that have no clue about attachment theory and somatic therapies, and that there's a huge limitation in talk therapy. So when
Yes.
people find that they're in talk therapy and they're not getting anywhere in their talk therapy, they drop out, but they don't know what else to do. And
Right.
and I find that people, it could be that they're keeping themselves safe because it really just strengthens the defense mechanism of intellectualization,
Right.
rationalization,
Exactly.
and
Yep.
it pulls you away from your heart. And what you need to do
Yes.
is drop into your heart and start connecting back and forth. And if you're
Right.
unable to do that for whatever reason, then talk therapy is not necessarily the right thing. It is a
Right.
matter of finding somebody who is well versed in a more of a emotive type of therapy.
Right.
And we were discussing before we started recording that sometimes traumas, even with traumas with a little t, are pre-verbal, and you can't
Yes.
necessarily talk about it because
All of the attachment is pre-verbal.
right. Right.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of things that you can't even access
Exactly.
through talk at all,
Right.
because you have no
Right.
awareness.
Right.
Well, you have awareness, but you don't know
Right.
what that awareness is. And
Right.
it's learning how to drop into that in a safe
Yep.
way.
Yes.
And there are a lot of, there is an attachment therapist, a book that people can read. And I had given you the name of a woman. Her name is Susan Pease Bannett, B-A-N-N-I-T-T. If anybody wants to learn more about that type of therapy, it's Wisdom, Love, and Attachment in Trauma Therapy. And that's a great book to read if people want to read more about this. And one of the things that comes up, and which is extremely frustrating for me, is that there are therapists that believe that love is not a topic to discuss in therapy. And one way to resolve attachment therapy, at least in psychotherapy, is to talk about love and to have that transference type of connection with your therapist that some therapists say is taboo, that's a boundary crossing. And so, yes, some boundary crossings are taboo in terms of a sexual way, but not in an infant, baby, friend, love, caring mother-child relationship way. And so I believe therapists need to really learn how to discern those two areas. Yes, there's clear boundary crossings when it comes to sexual, but there should be this realm of connecting to your patient in a love attachment way that has been lost. And the only way to connect that is to go there, to go there allow for that and allow for
Right.
those kinds of things,
Right.
and not to make it taboo.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you so much
Yeah.
for
Thank you.
bringing
This
that
is
up.
absolutely. These are really important topics to be bringing into mental health and medicine.
Absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to tell our audience that maybe we haven't touched upon that like super important for people to know?
Yeah, I would say that I'm thinking back of how I first started realizing that I may have an insecure attachment and attachment trauma. And it was when I realized, and I don't know how this came to my awareness, but I realized that around certain people who were in a position of authority, my eyes would always go down and to the left if I
Mm.
felt that they were disappointed in me.
Hmm.
Right? And I just started asking questions about that. Like, why would that be? And then I tried to stop it. I tried to change it and I couldn't. I
Wow.
couldn't. And that's where I realized, like, wait a second, like there's something deeper that's happening, that
Right.
talking about it and even me trying to consciously decide I'm going to stay looking at this person, I'm going to stay looking at, I can't. Like, my body takes over. And that's really what we need to start understanding then, is there is so much that our body can tell us
Yeah.
if we can just learn the language and know how to get those messages. And
Right.
it's so transformative once you understand the messages that your body has for you.
Right. Are you familiar with brain spotting?
Yes.
Yes. So I wonder, and I need to know more about this, but I wonder if you looked down to the left and actually went there and stayed there, focused on that, if that would be something that you would resolve by focusing on that area and allowing your eyesight to go there. So
Mhm.
brain
Yeah,
spotting therapy, that's
maybe
another.
like that has all gone away with my somatic work, especially around attachment stuff. Like,
Right.
it's gone away.
Yay.
And now I'm much more comfortable with situations that feel confrontational, or, things that before that would have made me just be like, whoa, this isn't safe for me.
Right.
And to kind of go away. And that's all gone away with the somatic work and the attachment work.
Right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Oh, that's so fantastic. I'm so happy for you. And I'm so happy that you developed, this training for people. I just want to let people know how to get in touch with you.
hmm
I need to pull that up. So I know that you have a website, and this will be all in the show notes. And can you tell people what you're going to be giving away if they're interested?
Yeah. So I have given them a discount, a 50% discount for the Shift to Calm Aliveness course, to help encourage them to take that, and to take that step in understanding and getting some tools for working with their body. And so that discount code is ALIVE.
Okay.
And that is 50% off of the Shift to Calm Aliveness course. And you should have that link that they can just directly go to that
Right.
enrollment page, see what it's about, learn more about it,
Yeah,
and
and
then
that'll
enroll.
end at the end of the year. And then, and you have a free download on Roadmap for Accelerating
Yes.
Healing of Attachment Trauma. And they can find you at www.bio-optimize.com.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I will
Yeah.
include all of that in the show notes, everybody. And I'm so happy we had this time together. I'm so excited. And I'm hoping that more and more people will learn about what you do, and even explore other types of therapy if they feel like they're not connecting with their therapist, that to know that there's all different kinds of therapy out there, all
Right.
different
Right.
kinds.
Right.
And if you're not connecting with your therapist, it may not necessarily be that your therapist, is not doing a good job. They are just trained in a specific area
Right.
of therapy, and they just don't know or are not trained about
Yep.
these types of therapies that are
Yep.
available. And there are many psychotherapists who are trained in somatic therapies and
Yep.
developmental therapies, things like that. So trauma therapy with a little t.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Aimie. I'm so pleased. I think this was a great interview, and I really appreciate everything that you brought to our session today.
Well, thank you for all of the work that you do. I think it's very important.
Thanks. Great.